Thank you, Mother. Hare Krishna. So now we're recording, but I won't say what I've just said again. So sorry about that if you're tuning into recording, but we're just giving an introduction because we're just moving into part 2 today. Okay, so we're just giving a little introduction to that and describing the different parts of Suddha Bhakti Cintamani. So part 4 is the qualification to hear Krishna's pastimes. And then finally, part 5 is very interesting. Well, the whole book is interesting, but part 5 is called The Path to Perfection. So Maharaj, he gives great detail about the different stages of devotion. And in part 5, he actually puts it into a story form and he introduces characters who come and take up Krishna consciousness and how they progress in their spiritual development to the stages of perfection, and he presents it in a contemporary way. So it's very interesting. But that's part 5. So it might be hopefully you'll all still be with us when we get to that part. When that might be, we don't know. Let's see. So here I've got a table of contents slides here, just again, so like a bit of a roadmap, so we know where we've come from and we know where we're going. I'm not going to go through every chapter right now, but just part 2, which we'll be beginning today. So we've already done. Some of you might have a few, uh, a little, or let me say, you might have some remembrance of these, not little, you might have quite a bit of these subjects that we've discussed already. So we began with knowledge of relationship, Sambandha Gyan, and a very basic definition of devotional service to begin with, coming from the original Vedas. And interesting discussion was how devotion awakens. You remember that discussion, Bhakti on Mukhi Sukriti, unknowing devotional acts. Then we describe what is the seed of devotion actually. And the seed that, okay, I'll ask a question. Hope you don't mind. I like asking questions. Can anyone say what the seed of devotion is, practically speaking? Because we get this, we get these whole discussions about the seed of pure devotion. So what is it exactly? Going once, going twice.
Yes.
As the Guru gives the seed of devotion.
Yeah, the Guru gives, yeah, but what is he giving? And then, like when you take initiation, do you get a packet of seeds?
No, the Maha Mantra.
Yeah,
That is the
go on.
rules and regulations,
Yes, well done. Who's that? Yes,
Sangita Priya.
Sangeeta Priya. Well done. Thank you. You're obviously taking notes down. Yes. So, yes, the rules, it's following the rules and regulations given by the Guru. So, if you're not doing that, then you're uprooting the seed. Okay. So, seed of devotion. And then so that's chapter 1. Then, chapter 2, we started a whole discussion on the semblance of devotion. So, semblance means it's a shadow. And we had that, and the effect of the modes. There's lots going against us in one sense. And one of those, or three of those things are the modes of material nature. So its effect on on the efforts to engage in pure devotional service. We had a discussion on that. Chapter 3, remember this, reflective semblance of faith, was the Mayavadis who have a, what's the word, have a wrong understanding of Krishna, etc. And then shadowy semblance of faith, that one's a bit more better. Remember that discussion? Yes, I can hear everyone. You could have, can some devotees have their cameras on? At the moment, I'm just looking at myself and it's not very pleasant. All right, so all right, thank you. Mother Sahajari is turning the camera on. Okay, and a few others as well. Thank you. Yes, Harika. Mother Bhajkasho, Mother Chandravali. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So yeah, so then we moved on to chapter 4. 4 impure motives for devotion. Can anyone say what verse from Bhagavad Gita that was all about? Going once. If I could see your lips moving, Mother Shawnee, but you're muted. Chatur Vidu. Yeah. I can't hear you somehow, Vishali. Anyway, all right, let's cut to the chase. The 4 impure motives for devotion. Chatur Vida Bhajanti Mam Jana Sukritina Arjuna Atita Nijignaso. Or was it Atiti Atati Ganicha Bharadashapa? So someone's in distress, someone's seeking wealth, someone's looking for knowledge, or someone's inquisitive. So we discussed that. And the indirect path to Krishna, as in compared to the direct path. And what path did Lord Chaitanya give us? Did he encourage us in the indirect path or the direct path?
Direct.
Direct path, yeah. Thank you, Mother Chandravali. Yes. Then 3 types of semblance of devotion. Karma Mishra Bhakti, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, and Yoga Mishra Bhakti. That's getting a bit closer to where we last left off. And then chapter 5, more on semblance of devotion. Do you remember last week we discussed subdivisions of mixed devotion? Subdivisions of subdivisions of subdivisions of subdivisions. It led to so many different varieties of semblance of devotion. It was a little bit bewildering of how many it is possible, or how many different flavors or different colors in the spectrum of a semblance of devotion there is actually out there or in there. You could say out there or in there in our heart. Yeah. And then eventually we spoke a little about how mixed devotion, how it leads to pure devotion. All right. So this is just a roadmap of where we've been and where we're going now. We're on part 2. We're entering into part 2. We're going to give a definition of devotional service. Hopefully we'll get there today if I finish through these slides. And so we're going to start with this. We mentioned this in the beginning. We gave a brief definition of pure devotion right in the beginning, but we're going to get into it. It's based on Rupa Goswami's definition. And for those who have studied the Nectar of Devotion, the next couple of weeks is going to be a study of the Nectar of Devotion, introduction on the specific verse of Rupa Goswami, and Anyabilasada Sunyam Gana Kamadi Anavadam. Yeah, so we'll be looking at that with some additional information as well coming from Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotion. And we'll be looking at its primary characteristics today. And next week we'll be looking at the secondary characteristics. Yes. And with devotion to the Son of Yasoda is supreme. So I'll just give you the rest of part 2 quickly. Secondary characteristics, that will be next week. Devotional renunciation, free from coverings. That's all commenting on the verse by Rupa Goswami. Then 3 qualifications of advancement, Kanishta, Madhyam, and Uttam. That's an interesting discussion. 3 levels of qualification and 3 levels of advancement. So it's a bit of a discussion so we can understand the distinction between the 2. Yeah. Then so more about that and about spiritual masters. What is their position? What is their position? What does their position have to be, etc. Yeah. Are they all liberated souls? That's a discussion that Mirage brings out there. So then chapter 9, freedom from all distress. This is Nectar of Devotion. Those who have done Bhakti Shastri, you might recognize this. The other 5, these are the characteristics of pure devotion, of which there's 6. 2 in relationship to sadhana, 2 in relationship to bhava, and 2 in relationship to prema. So then we define devotional service in practice and ways to attain Krishna's grace. And then we're looking at what kind of regulated devotion leads to Vrindavan. Yeah, because one type of regulated devotion leads to Vaikuntha. Another type of regulated devotion leads to Vraj. So we'll be speaking about that. The purpose of all the regulations. I can't remember what that's about. Excuse me. The 5 main items of devotion. Can everyone say what the 5 main items of devotion are?
Deity worship,
Deity
living
worship.
in Mathura,
Living in A holy
Mathura
place.
or
Yeah.
Reading Bhagavatam.
Studying Bhagavatam,
chanting
Association of devotees.
chanting the holy name, and associating with devotees. Yeah. So chanting is the most important. Deity worship. What about deity worship? What role does it play in our development of pure devotional service? Yeah. And then chapter 11. The transition. Maharaj, interesting, brings up here the rare transition to spontaneous devotion. So we'll be looking at that, an introduction on this subject and spontaneous devotion in general, and the qualification, the adhikar for spontaneous devotion. Then we'll be looking at greed, lobha, and its necessity. Okay, this is taking quite some time. I better speed up. All right, perhaps I'll just read through. I'll try not to comment so much. So this is what I'm going to be discussing in part two. Two aspects of devotional service in spontaneous service in practice, but the specific activities of spontaneous practice, 5 stages of absorption. Some of you have been attending our classes. You probably recognize this. We had a little course just on that. Lord Chaitanya's spontaneous devotion. Devotional service in ecstasy. This is looking at bhava. And then a definition of devotional service in pure love of Godhead. And that's part 2. Okay, part 3. So we're not going to take you through that. Yeah, because it would take too long. So so that's a little roadmap for you. And without further ado, any questions or comments? And that hopefully it's given a little bit of a clear idea of where we've been, where we are, and where we are going. No, I brought up the wrong slideshow. 1 second. Did I bring up the one? No, I brought up the right one. Okay. So Hare Krishna. So you could say finally, it's good to get to what devotional service is. We've been hearing a lot about what it is not. Kind of nati. Now, what is it actually? So pure devotional service defined. This is chapter 6 if you're following in the book. Yeah. So first, a little bit of history. Now, Lord Chaitanya, as we know, Lord Chaitanya appeared. Krishna, let's start with Krishna. Krishna appeared here, as we all know well, over 5,000 years ago. Then Lord Chaitanya appeared over 500 years ago. So the interval between the appearance of Lord Krishna, who spoke Bhagavad Gita, wherein principles of pure devotion is clearly described for those who are sadhakas, for those who are practicing devotional service. Krishna gave the practice of pure devotional service in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, between Lord Krishna's appearance and Lord Chaitanya's appearance, that had become almost lost. And we have this graphic picture here of Kali Yuga. Okay. So why? Because that's the nature of the material world. Like we have a leak in our temple. So what's that got to do with what I'm talking about? Well, there's a leak in the roof, so water always finds its lowest point. So we've got leaks going from the roof going down through the temple. So when you establish something good, especially in the age of Kali, then just by nature, unless you actually actively try to maintain your specific standards, it's going to go down. So anyway, what we're saying here is by the influence of Kali Yuga, then what we've been discussing, various semblances of devotion, or even Maharaj describes as fabricated devotion, had become synonymous with the goal of life. Like, we remember we mentioned these prosperity preachers. The goal of life, if you go to church, you get taught some churches, not all, the goal of life is to become rich. Yeah. So now, what happened is, and there's a whole history, we won't go into so many details. So generally, people in general, they had no clear access to the teachings, and therefore not the practice of pure devotional service. And even if someone a few souls, Maharaj mentions, who maybe search for it, there's a good chance they're going to get misled, yeah, by what describes ignorant or devious advocates of falsity. So misled, it's one of the symptoms of Gali. Unguided, what's it? Payana paso sabya kalo asmin yuge janaha mando samadamato yo mando upagyo o patataha. So we're short-lived, we're short-lived, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Yeah. So then Lord Chaitanya came, and he's the Lord himself, as we know, but very, very significantly, he came to show. He came to show by example, yeah, and precept and teaching, yeah, what is pure devotion. But he himself, he didn't write extensively. He only apparently he wrote the Shishastikam. But yeah, now Marge brings out here that before in the past they would hear there was a line of oral tradition in a dislibic succession. It's quite amazing to think that in the past there was no such thing as books. Can you imagine that? They would just hear. Their hearts were so pure. The atmosphere was so pure. Everything was favorable for just hearing and assimilating the knowledge that you hear from a potent source, going straight into the heart, yeah, and staying there, yeah. But over time, that is now we need books, yeah. The point I'm making here is that Lord Chaitanya he gave specific instructions to his confidential disciples, specifically speaking about the 6 Goswamis, to substantiate through Shastra the teachings of pure devotional service in all of its detail. And they did such a service in doing that. The teachings of Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, etc. Yeah. And as we know, if you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, then it is the Rupa Shiksha, Sanatana Shiksha, where Lord Chaitanya specifically was teaching and explaining as what they should write, yeah, based on Shastra. So he specifically empowered Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami to write, we could say, bhakti scriptures to make it clear what is actually pure devotional service. Anything to add along the way from anyone, or please feel free to raise your hand or let yourself be known. And please, if I've missed something or I get something wrong, please let me know. So in this regard, Rupa Goswami, he wrote what some say is the most authoritative guide for pure devotional service. Can anyone name that book? Going once?
Bhakti-Rasamrta-Sindhu.
Yes, correct. Bhakti-Rasamrta-Sindhu, the ocean of the rasa. What is it? Bhakti-Rasamrta-Sindhu, the ocean of devotion. Yeah, Bhakti-Rasamrta-Sindhu. As we know, Prabhupada gave a summary study, the nectar of devotion. Yeah. So in there, he gives what we're covering a little bit today. He gave a precise definition, and a very precise definition of pure devotion. So he, as we will see, he describes its distinct characteristics. Yeah, but he describes distinct characteristics of pure devotion in practice, which is known as sadhana, in ecstasy, which is bhava, and in prema. Yeah, so he gave distinct characteristics of each of these. Now, this is in the following verse, which I'm sure we know what verse is coming next. This is his. This comes in the introduction. Prabhupada writes about it in the introduction to the Nectar of Devotion. So this is Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotional service, and he uses the term, of the term Uttama Bhakti. So here it is. Hopefully by the end of the next 2 weeks, we're going to understand a bit more about this and to appreciate Rupa Goswami's very precise definition. Yeah. So we've been looking at semblance of devotion. So this gives a very specific, clear understanding of what is actually the topmost devotion, Uttama Bhakti. So, Anya Bilasita Sunyam Jnana Kamadi Anavritam. Sorry, there's no diacritics here. I haven't got around to doing that in the Sanskrit. I should do. Anukulyena Krishnano Silanam Bhakti Uttama. So would someone like to read the translation for us?
Hare Krishna. Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, please go ahead, Mother Sangeeta Priya. Thank you.
When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires. Knowledge obtained by monastic philosophy and primitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. Bhakti-Rasamrta-Sindhu 1.1.11.
So in essence, it's not different from the definitions that we will find in Srimad Bhagavatam, but but its preciseness, Maharaj describes, it kind of clears up lingering misconceptions. So Rupa Goswami is writing this verse for a specific purpose because there is a lot, there is, and there will be a lot of misconceptions about what is actually devotional service to God, to a Krishna. Now, Rupa Goswami, specifically, he used the term Uttama Bhakti. So he's making a point there, just like when Prabhupada, he entitled Bhagavad Gita as it is. So he's making a point. That point is that every other Bhagavad Gita is as it's not. And sometimes scholars have they have an issue with Prabhupada's title, Bhagavad Gita as it is. So in the same way, Rupa Goswami is distinguishing Lord Chaitanya's movement from cheating religions and the impure impure forms of devotion by saying Uttama Bhakti. This is the topmost. Yeah. So it's very interesting. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his comments, Maharaj brings in Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he describes it in a way, just if you have a friend and you say, here's some pure water. So he's saying pure water to distinguish it from water that's contaminated. So here, so Rupa Goswami is kind of in the Bhakti-Rasamrta-Sindhu, he's welcoming, he's introducing the subject that what's going to be spoken about is first-class devotion. Yeah, to distinguish it from what we've been discussing the last 10 weeks. Okay, to make that clear distinction. Yeah, and so he calls it Uttama. So also in other definitions, these are other definitions that I'm sure you've come across in the reading of our Sastra and Prabhupada's books. The same thing, but use something. It's interesting because these words are used in different contexts, but they all mean the same thing. So here we have Uttama, Kevala means exclusive, Ananya, unalloyed, Kinchana, untainted, and Suddha. So we have Suddha Bhakti Cintamani. Yeah. So so this is known, this verse here, this is known, I'm going to introduce a word now. Perhaps some of you might have heard of it before, but a Paribhasha Sutra. Yeah, so a Paribhasha Sutra it's a method or it's a specific statement in a book if that book seems to contain some, how to explain it, some apparently unrelated arguments or facts. If you have the Paribhasha Sutra, you can understand the actual purport of the book. Did that make sense? I just read here directly from Rupa Goswami, from the Krishna Sandarbha, just in case it didn't make sense what I said. Okay. A Paribhasha Sutra explains the proper method for understanding the book. It gives a key by which one may understand the true import of a series of apparently unrelated facts and arguments. So, for example, anyone know the Paribhasha Sutra of Srimad Bhagavatam? Eche kamsa kalapamsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indriyani Vyalokam Mitagenti Yuge Yuge. So of all the different incarnations, Krishna and Balaram are the origin of all incarnations. Yeah, this is so. Sometimes in Bhagavatam, you may see Lord Shiva described as Bhagavan. So it might cause some misunderstanding, or who is the supreme. So just so then you go to the Paribhasha Sutra. Okay. So I was just looking beforehand. Oh, I haven't got my phone. I just looked on Chat GBT. Excuse me. Sometimes I use that. So what's the Paribhasha Sutra of the Bhagavad Gita? Interesting answer it came up with. It depends on the specific school. So generally, the Paribhasha Sutra, generally of Bhagavad Gita, generally for Vaishnavas in general, is 1866. Sarvadam Priyachatya. Or sometimes different acharyas have different opinions. Or sometimes it's Man Manama Bhakto Majiti Nam Namaskuru. Yeah. So like that. That's the Paribhasha Sutra. Okay, is that clear, everyone? So, any questions or comments, please feel free to ask, or anything to add. So Maharaj brings out a very important point here. He says that in a similar way, the Krishna consciousness movement is based on this definition. Our Krishna conscious movement should be based on this definition of pure devotion, which Rupa Goswami has defined. So he mentions that there's many different facets to our Krishna conscious movement. Not in distributing it, that's that's our life and soul, distributing it, and also practicing it. So what we're doing in our Krishna conscious movement, it must conform to this definition here. Yeah, so we might analyze what we're doing, and it become more clear as we go on today. I try not to give too much away before I get to the slides. Yeah, where was it? Here, yeah. Yeah. So sometimes we might have to adjust things to bring it in line with the definition, or to bring our practice in line with this definition of pure devotional service. So in other words, we have to it's a bit like a mission statement. Yeah, and like a devotional template. Yeah, so it's a mission statement is something that companies have just so they can be reminded of what their company is about. So they have this mission statement, and they have to come up with a mission statement. I remember I've been in many temple council meetings where we're trying to come up with a mission statement for our temple. And I can't remember one of them for now. So I should look again. Yeah, so mission statement. So this verse is the mission statement for our Krishna consciousness and also for our individual practice. Yeah. And as we get to analyze it, it'll become more relevant of how that is so. Okay. Now, Prabhupada, and we're going to get into analyzing this now. Prabhupada and also the previous acharyas, if just this verse, all our previous acharyas give quite some detail about this. Yeah. Of course, post Rupa Goswami, because he gave this verse. So what they explain, each word, every word and phrase they actually speak about, or they discuss it. Yeah. So why? Because we want to dispel dispel any ignorance about what is pure devotion. We want to be very clear of what it is, because unless we're clear, how are we going to practice it? We have to be very clear what it actually is. And also it helps us to protect us from the influence of semblance of devotion. Yeah. So some quite discussion. The whole of the introduction of the Nectar of Devotion is based on this verse. Prabhupada gives a commentary on this verse. Yeah. Okay. So everyone's okay? We're all okay? All online? We're all ready to go forward? Shall we go forward? A mass of approval? Yes, let's go forward. Yeah, spiritual life is about going forward. Never backwards. We want to go forward. Forward, forward, forward. Always forward. Always forward. Okay. So what's interesting, although Maharaj doesn't bring it out, but I find it interesting, is that primary characteristics of pure devotion is described in the last two lines. Yeah, so we're going to the primary characteristics are here. These secondary characteristics are, excuse me, oh God. These secondary characteristics are here. So we're going to be looking at this today in the time that we have left. Yeah. So these are the primary characteristics of pure devotion. And you can take a note of this if you want, although the recording will be there as well, or it's in the Suddha Bhakti Cintamani as well. It's there. So here they are. To be fully, and we'll discuss each of these. To be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness. So what does that mean? To be fully engaged. Perform with intent favorable to Krishna. Has Krsna as the sole beneficiary. Okay. So this is from Prabhupada in the Nectar of Devotion. He describes, quote from the Nectar of Devotion in the introduction, first-class devotional service is known by one's tendency to be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, serving the Lord favorably. Yeah, so there we have three. It is full engagement. Krishna Anusilanam. Okay, here's Krishna Anusilanam. Full engagement. Okay. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit here. It's done with favorable intent. Krishna Anukuli Yena, and it has Krishna as the sole beneficiary. Okay, so what does it mean by full engagement? Yeah, Krishna Anusilanam. So some of you might be familiar with this if you've done Bhakti Sastri, especially because I teach my Nectar Devotion in Bhakti Sastri, so I kind of bring this in sometimes. Prabhupada speaks about it as well. So it has many different aspects. Like, let me just read this here. Srila Prabhupada writes that the energy by which devotional service is performed can be spiritualized by the mercy of both the bona fide spiritual master and Krishna. So we shall elaborate on that, what Prabhupada means by that. So basically, fully engaged means either at the stage of practice, yeah, sadhana, or the stages of perfection. What we're doing should be authorized by dislibic succession. Yeah, even perfections of, say, not spontaneous practice, but spontaneous actual devotion, it should be authorized by the dislibic succession. So that's one thing. Yeah. What's that verse? Shuti smriti pranadadi panchacha vidinvina oikanti iti yata. I forget the last line. Yeah, but describes that unless devotion is following scripture, then it can be just a disturbance. Anyway, so okay, you follow that? So Srila Prabhupada used the word, Prabhupada specifically used the word cultivation to indicate full engagement, a full engagement that reawakens our dormant spirit of loving devotion. So you got it? So cultivation means to cultivate full engagement. And Jiva Goswami, he gives a commentary on this verse. So he divides this cultivation, which Prabhupada describes as full engagement, into two aspects. Yep. You follow? In two aspects. So one is the chesta. That's the activity itself. We spoke a little bit about this in our other classes on Sankabha Gaumudi. So some of you might be familiar with this. So the activity, chesta, and then the activity should have a specific mood, bhava. So cultivation has two aspects. Jiva Goswami explains. There's the chesta and the underlying mood of devotion, bhava. So it's not specifically describing the stage of bhava, but bhava in the context of bhava meaning mood. Yeah. Just like if you're cleaning the temple room floor, there should be a mood of devotion while you're cleaning the floor. Okay. So you got the chesta and you got the devotion. Yeah. If you're just doing the chesta and there's no devotion, okay, you get some benefit. But tiny benefit. Yeah. Now both are connected. Yeah. So yeah, so in that way, the activities of devotion should include the mood of devotion. Okay. Shouldn't forget that. I mean, sometimes it's so easy to forget, especially when you got various duties in the temple. You can just do it out of duty. Oh, now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. Now I have to, especially myself. Now I have to close the curtains. Now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. Now I put the incense in the holder. Now I'm going to light the incense. Sometimes we forget. No, there has to be mood of devotion that actually goes with it. Yeah. So it has to be bhava, not just chesta. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and Prabhupada.
Not a
Yeah.
not as a checklist.
Sorry?
Not as a checklist.
Yeah, not as a checklist. Yeah. Okay, done that, done that, done that, done that. Yeah, just like we teach, we also teach about deity worship. And when we teach the students about arti, we take them through all the items of arti, what they mean, how to offer them, what are the misconceptions. And then we say, well, there's something missing here. And we ask, so what's missing? What's the most important thing you can offer to Krishna? And often they don't get it at first. But it's devotion. Yeah, it's the most important thing to offer to Krishna. So the bhava, rupa. Yeah. So Prabhupada says here, this again in the introduction, without activity, yeah, so he describes the other side. So without activity, consciousness alone cannot help. Yeah, without activity, consciousness alone cannot help. Yeah. So there are two sides to the cultivation of the activities of devotion. Yeah, and this comes from, let me just get I took some notes on my phone, 1 second. Excuse me. Yeah, it's a verse I've been meaning to learn for about 15 years. I haven't got around to it yet. It's speaking, so the 6 aspects of surrender. So there's 2 sides to the cultivation of activities of devotion. So that's 1, accepting things that are favorable, pavriti, and rejecting those that are unfavorable, nivritti. So that's anukulyasya sankalpa, accepting everything that is favorable for devotional service. There's 6 symptoms of surrender known as sharanagati. Yeah. And pratikulyasya vajinam, so rejecting everything that's unfavorable for devotional service. So remember, this is what it means by full engagement. Yeah. Now these coming from the 6 stages of surrender in pure faith, known as sharanagati. So the first two is accepting what is favorable and rejecting what is unfavorable. Now this is in relation to the body, words, and mind. So it gets a little bit more subtle as each one. So okay, you do. So what's favorable for the body? Okay, you bow down. Yeah, you bow down. If you go to the temple, you ring the bell and you bow down. And the words, you want to speak favorable words to help us develop in Krishna consciousness. But then the mind is a bit more subtle. You want to be thinking of good thoughts, thoughts that are favorable for the cultivation of devotional service, not thoughts that are cultivating material attachment. Yeah, so you understand it gets a bit more from gross to subtle. So all three should be done with these two things in mind, rejecting what is unfavorable, and rejecting what is unfavorable, and accepting what is favorable. Okay? We okay so far? Any questions or comments? Please feel free to ask. Now,
Nectar of instruction, right?
sorry?
Nectar of instruction. Favorable.
Yeah,
unfavorable.
nectar of instruction also. Yeah, thank you for bringing it out, Mother Chandravali. Nectar devotion. So Rupa Goswami gives a very succinct the different stages of devotion in the nectar of instruction. Yes, thank you. Jayvet, Prabhu, you had your hand raised?
No, it's Mataji. Sorry, Prabhuji. Can you just repeat
Please,
the
yes.
one about the mind you just said? How to cultivate? What did you mention, please?
Yeah, I'm just saying that it becomes more difficult. So, for example, because the mind is subtle, so we want to do things that are favorable with the body. So then what's favorable for devotion for the body? Well, we keep it clean. We bow down when we come into the temple. Yeah, it's quite easy to do. A bit more difficult than that is the words. So our words should be chaste to the our development of devotional service. But then the mind, we should think what is favorable. We should only think what is favorable for Krishna consciousness. And sometimes living in this material world, it's not so easy. Yeah, the things we have to see, the things we're exposed to. Yeah. So is that more clear? Well, so it's just saying it's a bit more difficult. But
Thank you.
is that
Thank you.
yeah, I'm sure we all experience when we sit down to try and chant Hare Krishna. Yeah. Now, what activities are favorable for devotion? You're going to find that in the nectar of devotion, and we're not going to go over that because it's 64 items of sadhana bhakti, which is there in the nectar of devotion. So Rupa Goswami describes, what do you actually do? You don't just sit there thinking. There's things you do. Well, you think as well, bhava, but what do you actually do? So he mentions there you wear the Lord garlands, you take the remnants of the Lord's food, you attend the festivals, you dance for the Lord, etc. He gives a list of 64 items of sadhana bhakti. Yeah. Beginning with, can anyone tell us where it all begins?
Sankirtanam?
Yeah, well, no, before that. Well, actually, it might be Kirtan first, but Guru Pad Ashraya. That's how he begins, taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, then inquiring from him submissively. Then he expands it into 64 items. So these are activities that are favorable for the cultivation of pure devotional service. So this comes under full engagement. Yeah, this comes under Anukulyena, if I got that right. Yeah, Anukulyena. Yeah. Okay. Let me just and he also gives activities to avoid. Also, a nectar of instruction gives as well in a very succinct way. Yeah, it's amazing. If you want to understand the whole science of devotion, you can just read the nectar of devotion. I mean, the nectar of instruction and the verses. Of course, you have to study it a bit. I remember before I joined the ashram, or before I took up Krishna consciousness, I was in the temple bookshop. I forget if I ordered it or, but it's a book that was entitled The Complete Understanding of the Process of Krishna Consciousness. And it was a small little book. And that was the nectar of instruction, or the complete understanding of it. Of course, it can be you kind of fluffed out, it has quite a deep meaning. But you get the point I'm making here is yeah, if you look in the nectar of devotion, the activities to avoid are also there. Yeah. So they, for instance, as in the nectar of instruction as well, giving up the company of non-devotees. Yeah. So that's can be a challenge for some when they start taking an interest in bhakti, how they go about that, how they go about implementing that in their life. And that needs some discussion with senior devotees. Yeah. It doesn't mean you don't speak to your family ever again if they're not chanting 16 rounds. Doesn't mean you stop going to work or you stop going on the tube because there's all non-devotees on the tube. Yeah, so that sometimes takes some counseling and some explaining. Yeah, we won't get into it now, but just for so religiously giving up the company of non-devotees and also of avoiding offenses. Yeah, so you have to know what they are. Seva parad, you got a choice to make, quite a big choice to make if you want to make offenses. You know you shouldn't want to make them. Seva parad, nama parad, dharma parad. Yeah. So that's described in the nectar devotion. So again, this is all full engagement. Yeah. Now I also looked at the word ano, the prefix anosilanam. It's, it's anosilanam. Ano, like here, anosilanam. Again, as we mentioned, every syllable is so precise to give us a clear understanding. So we're going to describe this anosilanam. Right, let's scroll back where I left off. So ano, it means if you look at in the Sanskrit dictionary, if you have one. Yeah. By the way, I might have said this before. Sorry if you heard me say this before, but for those who study a bit deeply, if you want a Sanskrit dictionary, then you can use ChatGPT. You just put in a Sanskrit word and it gives you the definition. It's very interesting. So ano, it means, to the prefix ano, it means following. Let me just read what came up with here. Ano means it's an upasaga, which means it's a prefix, as it's a prefix that comes before a specific word. So it means after, to follow along, according to. So for instance, chanting, following after. Anusarana is another word, to follow. Yeah, so anusilam. So it means the cultivation of devotional service must follow the guidance of spiritual masters who are themselves in the chain of deliberate succession. Yeah. So that connection has to be there. So Rupa Goswami is making this clear. If you want to practice pure devotional service, you have to be initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, and the activity, you should follow his instructions. Yeah. So these activities of devotion are performed according to Krishna's instructions, which are coming from the Guru. Now, what is significant about this is that because if the instructions that you're following are connected, you're connected to the powerhouse. So your activities become spiritualized. Yeah. Because devotional service is an aspect, Maharaj writes here, of Krishna's Surup Shakti. So following the instructions of the Guru, you're lining up with that electricity, with that Surup Shakti. And of course, the more pure your heart is, the more pure we are, then the more we can exhibit that Shakti by following those instructions. Yeah. So devotional service is an aspect of Krishna's internal potency. So I just read this part here. So when a devotee performs activities following Krishna's desire, the Shrup Shakti coming from Krishna through the spiritual matter spiritualizes those activities. And Prabhupada says, he writes it as, can be spiritualized by the mercy of both the bona fide spiritual master and Krishna. That's how your activities become spiritualized. If the instructions and the blessings of the Guru is there, yeah. Then Marge brings out here, like, it takes a trained eye to actually see this and to appreciate it. So for some, the activities of devotees may seem quite mundane. Yeah. So, for example, a materialistic person, they may exhibit affection for a child in so many ways. The Maharaj brings out, they may see a devotee exhibit affection for the Lord's deity form, dressing the deity, cleaning the deity, putting garlands on gently, and they may think it's just the same material thing. They may see it in a material way, but they don't understand that those activities under the direction of the Guru are super mundane, apakrita. Yeah, it's all Krishna's spiritual energy. Anyway, so he gives that example. Okay. So more clear now what means full engagement. There's the challenge. That's what it means to be fully engaged. Yeah. So let's have a look at this now. That's the first one. The first one, to be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness. Any questions about this? Okay. So what does this mean? Some of you might have an idea already. With intent, favourable to Krishna. So Rupa Goswami specifically writes this here in this verse. Yeah. So this is the secondary of the primary characteristics that is performed with intent favourable to Krishna. There's a nice discussion this, but I think Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur brings this out. It's very interesting. So it's again, the word anukul yena means with favourable intent. So when Krishna is added as a prefix, it means that the cultivation of devotional activities must be done in a mood favourable to Krishna. Yeah. Alexander, do you have your hand there?
Yeah, I thought that with intent favorable to Krishna, isn't it when his desire becomes our desires?
When his desires become our desires. That's quite esoteric. Yeah, you could say that, but we're going in another direction here. Just like, hang on for a moment. Yeah.
Okay.
We're going in a slight different direction. I mean, you're not wrong in one sense. We just, but yeah, be more clear.
When we say that Krishna, Yashoda is like devotion, she's got love for Krishna, whereas like Kamsa was thinking of Krishna all the time, but
Yeah, that's it. That's more closer to the point we're making. So he was unfavorable. Now, this from Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. So he brings out that if we consider that the definition of pure devotion would also be complete if it was just pleasing to Krishna. Why favorable intent? Isn't pleasing to Krishna enough? Why not just put pleasing to Krishna? Yeah. Why? I mean, that's enough, isn't it? Surely. What's the goal of life? Is to please Krishna. Some siddhi haditoshanam, all occupational engagements are certainly meant for pleasing Krishna. Yeah. So he brings out that any other meaning. So what Rupa Goswami is saying here. So let me get this right. Let me just read it. Any meaning other than the one intended by the author imposes a definition on pure devotion that is too broad or too narrow. It has to be intent. It's not just pleasing. If it's just pleasing, you can define it. The definition can be too broad or too narrow. And those who know this, you can see the pictures up here. So you might recognize what we're getting at here. So if it was just pleasing, if it was just pleasing to Krishna. So here is Krishna wrestling with Chanora. So Chanora is pounding Krishna with his mighty strong arms, much to the horror and fright of all his devotees who are watching. Now, Krishna likes, he's Rasaraj, so he likes the Vira Ras. For him, Krishna's just playing. Krishna's not in fear of his life. He's having fun. Chanora's trying to kill him. He's wrestling, but Krishna likes to wrestle. So if the definition of pure devotion was just pleasing, so Chanora is pleasing Krishna. So therefore, he's doing a great service to Krishna. So he's a great devotee of Krishna but he's not, because his intent is wrong. His intent is corrupt. He wants to kill Krishna. So it doesn't come under the auspices of Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotion. So it's not enough to say it's pleasing. The intent has to be favorable. You understand? That's when it's too open. The definite list is too open. And you can understand how people will come up with all types of speculations if that's not clearly laid out. People will be doing all types of things. Oh, this is pleasing to Krishna. All types of speculations. No, the intent has to be favorable. Okay, Krishna likes Vira Ras, so you're pleasing him. It doesn't mean that Chanura is on the level of Uddhava. Uddhava, or a great devotee. No, he's a demon. Now, what about the other one? So, too open. So too narrow. So I just put that out there, too narrow. So someone can explain why the definition of pleasing is not suitable here. What is the argument that Vishwanath gives? Just think about it. If Chanura is pleasing Krishna, Madhya Soda, is she pleasing Krishna?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah,
Generally,
Madhya.
the intention is not good, not favorable to Krishna. But the Mother Yashoda love Krishna, the loving, affectionate way he is doing the service.
Yeah, that's a more, if we go deeper into it. But for all intents and purposes, Krishna's not very happy. Is he? If he's trying to bind him, he's freaking out. He doesn't like it. He's crying. So Krishna's not pleased. So you understand? Vishnu Thakur said. Then that means if it goes to the definition of pleasing, then Madhya Yasoda is so Chanora is doing better service than Madhya Yasoda, because Chanora is pleasing Krishna, Madhya Yasoda is not pleasing Krishna. You understand?
It's a pastime, and
Yep.
Krishna loves this. One of his rasa. It's a rasa.
Yeah, it is, because we're devotees here, so we know the tattva, we know the thing. But just by Vishnav's interesting definition he gives as examples, someone may.
And she's doing it out of love as well.
Yeah, she's doing it out of love. I heard I read something the other day. I was reading I'm reading Jiva Goswami at the moment, and he's describing why did Madhya Yasoda go to save the milk? Well, because the milk was boiling for Krishna.
Yeah.
It was
Yes.
boiling up for Krishna, so she wanted, that was devotional service.
Also, isn't there so many different rasas that Krishna enjoys? So this is, like fear is also one of the rasas he enjoys.
It's being tied up against his will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course he's Rasiraj, so he's the connoisseur of all different exchanges of rasa, all different flavors. But specifically here, you get the point here how the word is the word in favorable intent. You see here, the intent has to be favorable. Intent favorable to Krishna. So he brings that out. So in other words, it is not correct to describe anukulyena simply as pleasing. The word must mean with intent to please Krishna.
Mm.
Yeah? The intent must be. So the intent was to please Krishna here. The intent was not to please Krishna. Alexander Prabhu, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I thought maybe it's both. Maybe
Both,
it's a
how's that?
mix. Pleasing and unpleasing. It's because Krishna enjoys mysteriously different kind of rasa, negative and positive at the same sometimes.
Yeah, that may be so, but I'm just saying on the part of the person, on the part of the sadhaka, the part of the person, they should be intent. Their mood should be intent to Krishna, should be intent to please him. It should be favorable. Then it can be termed as pure devotional service. Yeah. Yeah, that's the point that's being made here. Okay.
Because Krishna is being challenged in the first. He's being challenged, so Krishna likes the challenge.
Yeah, he likes the fight.
Hmm.
Just like in, of course, I guess we've all seen the film, the Shingadev.
Yes.
Big fight at the end. Quite dramatic. Yeah, Krishna having a great time. He's having a great time, he's playing around with this guy, and so is Nrsimhadev rendering favorable devotional service? Is Hiranyakasipu rendering favorable devotional service? No, his intent is wrong. It's corrupt. He wants to kill Krishna. So he's not doing pure devotional service, okay?
Did then not Jay and Vijay come because Krishna wanted the chivalry ras?
Okay. All you guys are too scholarly, man. Too spoiling it all. You're spoiling it all. You know too much.
You asked, so I'm just. I was keeping quiet.
Yeah. Okay, unfortunately, we have to stop there, but we won't stop. We'll pause and we'll continue next week. And we'll look at this, having Krishna as a sole beneficiary. Yeah. A transcendental dichotomy, the 4 qualities of Krishna, like that. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us for this. Thank you for giving us an opportunity. Now we're on describing about the glories of pure devotion. So we'll continue next week. Okay, and I'll put the recording up if anyone wants to go over it again. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Very nice.
Hare
Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Wonderful class. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Ram,
Bol.
Ram, Hare.
Krishna.
Jai.
Jai.
Krishna. Hare